So wonderful to see you again. It's Judy from Coffee Cookies and Books, and what we're doing today is Deep Dive Episode 2. So you may have noticed I'm in a slightly different spot. I thought that I would try something a little bit different for this episode. I thought that sitting at the desk and just, discussing these chapters and a little bit formal. I think it works really great when I'm doing, book reviews and I have a ton of books that we have to manage. But we just have these two, so I thought we'd do it right here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver, and we are covering chapter 2, which was Memory Lane. And there's one small little documentation right after chapter 2. So I, of course, as with the first chapter, went through and made notes as I read through. So just on a summary, the people that want to come in and look at the house arrived. And at the end of the first chapter, Eve changes her mind and lets them in. And the father basically says, 15 minutes. And that's where it starts. Of course, we all know that just letting them in was probably Eve's first mistake, but it is what it is. So just to be clear, the condition of the house is not in great shape. That was why Eve and Charlie bought it. They got a really good deal on it. And what they do is they buy houses and then they fix them up and flip them. So that's what they've been doing. And that is their plan for this house. This house is in pretty bad shape. So they're actually even contemplating demolition, which would mean tearing the whole house down. Yeah, question to that one, right? So the family, of course, they come in and she is thinking through her head, that they're going to see the condition of the house and that, when they bought it, it had said, the ad had said ready to be lived in state. Now, if you read the documentation before, which was the ad for the house, she is referring back to that ad, which is now no longer available. You can't see it. So that's what it basically said. And she referenced that. And, I think Eve feels a little self-conscious about the condition of the house, even though it's not her fault. I mean, that was kind of the impression that I got from that. Now, so they come in, they take their coats off. It's obvious that Thomas, who is the father, is quite comfortable in the house. I mean, he even opens the coat closet, puts their coats in it. It's a very, I guess you could call it intimate feeling that this man has been in this house before. It's obvious. If she had any question about the validity of what he was saying, I mean, I think that helped it. Then, of course, there's other things as you go through that he talks about as far as the house is concerned. It's clear that, yes, he did grow up in that house. The other thing that I find kind of interesting is that the mother doesn't seem to want to be there. So it's almost like when Eve wasn't going to let them into the house, you might recall from chapter 1, that Paige, the mom, had a relieved look on her face. So it was like, okay, thank God we're not going in there, right? Thomas is the one who really wanted to, and Jenny really wants to. Now, Jenny is only 7, okay? And there are certain things that Jenny does that you think about, she's only 7, Okay. Like, yeah, she's very, she is inquisitive, but I'm not sure that that inquisitive nature is just because Jenny is 7 and his daughter. Now, there's the two boys. There is Newton and Kai. I think Kai's the younger one. Um, and Newton is very introverted. So uh, Kai tends to pick on Newton, and that comes up throughout it. But there's a description she gives of Kai, and she says, Kai, hands in the pockets of a Portland Winterhawks hoodie, rolled his cold blue eyes. I thought that was interesting because that was how she described the mother, that the mother had cold blue eyes. I thought kind of unusual, right? But the other thing she notes is that, like, the two boys don't really look alike at all. Where, like, she thinks Kai looks like Thomas, whereas the younger one kind of looks out of place almost. So, I mean, there is that. Then when we go on to page 14, the one thing that kind of stood out from this is that it's just her description of Thomas, okay? So looking at him now, Eve realized he was a little older than she'd first thought. Under the brighter light, the markings of time were more visible on his face, lines etched across his skin, traces of gray hair speckled around the temples. But more than any physical markers, she could sense it behind his eyes, a weary burden of hidden knowledge that only came with age, the kind of eyes that had seen one too many caskets lowered into the dirt. So I thought that was interesting because I think it sort of describes him in such a way that he seems visually older than how he appears, if that makes sense. Like, her senses are that he's older than he appears. So I actually underlined that section of the book because I thought it was an interesting thing to mention. And then they do actually come across the fact that Eve and Charlie have a dog. And the dog's name is Shiloh. And Shiloh is a rescue that Eve found. I can't remember now. It's in here, but yeah, anyway, Eve found him and brought him home, and he does not like strangers. Eve was the only person who could ever get close to him for the longest time. It took him a very long time to even accept Charlie. So, of course, he does not want anything to do with these people. And then Thomas mentions that they had a chocolate lab growing up. So, there's the whole discussion about the dog, but the dog's name is Shiloh. Now, there are aspects about the dog throughout the book. Obviously, I've read this before, and this is a reread for me. So I think it's important to note all of the little things about everyone, including the dog. So that's why I bring that up. It's clear that, the dog never liked strangers, and he is definitely not happy to be that these people are coming in the house. So it's almost like a sixth sense from him. You know how animals are, right? But she kind of writes it off because he's a rescue and that's how he is. I don't know if that's all there is to it, I mean, that's the kind of feeling you get when you read through all of that. Now, another thing that I found interesting in this chapter, besides, the discussion about the dog, Thomas is like trying to be really super helpful. Like, he's like, this is like, I grew up with my father, and he's talking about all the things that his father did in the house. And he's like, I think I have the original blueprints and everything. And she can't bring herself to tell him that they're thinking about tearing the house down. I think it would have been I think if she had mentioned that, it would have been interesting to see his reaction. And there's reasons for that going forward on the importance of the house in particular. But yeah, it's just, I thought that was interesting that she didn't say that they were considering that, even if they weren't going to do it, right? But that they were considering it. Anyway, I thought that was kind of strange. And then at one point, she says he pulls a rectangular white tin from his pocket, and in quick motion, he gets 3 mints and pulls them out. The only thing is that Eve knows she can tell they're not mints. They look like they're prescription. And then when Jenny wants one, she says, these aren't sweet. So he's like, he makes an excuse not to give her one, right? And, and then he's spotting other things. So basically, they're just going in through the house on the lower level. They don't get very far. I think they're kind of in the living room area, foyer, the staircase is there, that sort of thing. And at one point, he goes over to the staircase and he runs his hand on the underside of the banister. And he says, oh, right, I almost forgot about those. Now, what he's talking about is Eve bent down to see an odd symbol had been carved, a circle divided by intersecting lines of varying lengths, all meeting in the middle. It looked cryptic, kind of like ancient glyph. Now, if you remember at the beginning, the map, there is a section of these with these little weird glyph markings right here. Okay. Don't know if you can see that. I'll try bring it closer to the camera. And this gets brought up again. And now I'm not sure if it gets brought up in the documentation or if it's in the rest of the story, because I can't remember that. But that's important, okay? And I think the markings mean something. Not entirely sure what they mean, but they definitely mean something. So he's, talks about that. And then he does talk about his sister. Okay. So this is the first indication where he mentions her. Now, he doesn't go into a lot of detail about her or anything of that nature, but he does talk about his sister. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then he's like, do you mind if we go upstairs? So obviously he wants to see the second floor. So she lets them up on the second floor. And, he's like reminiscing about where this used to be and where that used to be in the house. Okay, as we're going through the second floor. And then he mentions a window. And he says, this is Thomas, that window, and he's pointing to a stained glass window. I don't remember it being in this room. He scratches his temple. I thought it was at the front of the house. Funny how memories can change. And then he stops and says, a dumbwaiter used to be here. So these are things that he's noting in the house that don't seem to be there. Now, the stained glass window, I think, is an important element to mark off and remember. I can't recall that detail a lot, but I know it does get brought up again in the book. I just can't remember in what fashion. It is an important point. Now, when they're talking about it, he says there used to be a dumbwaiter here. He says, resting his palm against a wall, went all the way down to the basement. He starts to slide his hand down. So basically, he discovers that the dumbwaiter has been covered up somehow. Like it's there, still there. It's just that the entrance to it has been covered up, which is a little strange. I mean, I guess, depends on who had been there and depends on how important that particular element in the house is, but it's going to come to play before the end of the chapter. So just hang in there. They're there's like, some discussion about what a dumbwaiter is because Jenny wants to know. 7-year-old wants to know what is a dumbwaiter, like why is it called that? So there's a whole discussion about it. And Jenny, through this whole thing, Jenny's got her little notebook and she's making notes about everything. Again, this is a 7-year-old. I find that unusual. Like she's making notes about everything. She notes everything down. But then she turns around and she says, "Thanks, Emma," to Eve. So that's important. Wanted to bring it up. Something to make note of. I underlined it in red because it is important. Okay? Because clearly she's not Emma. Her name is Eve. And it's like, Eve says, yeah, it's okay. She would have just gone with it, accepted Emma as her new name for the duration of the family tour. So she just thinks that Jenny just hasn't remembered that her name is Eve. Like it's very, very unusual. So then they end up coming down the stairs and they say the dog, now the dog is acting weird. Okay. So at this point, once they get all down there, she says, Shiloh whines. Eve looks back. The dog is standing in the middle of the room, rigid, ears pricked, staring at a closed door, the basement door. So this basement plays a huge role. It's going to start right from this chapter. And the basement freaks the dog out, but the basement also freaks out Eve. She does not like the basement. She doesn't want to go into the basement. She hates basements, period. It's like she has a bit of a phobia when it comes to basements. And, it kind of goes through all of that, like her anxiety about them. I mean, she has an anxiety about going up the stairs and somebody's going to reach through and grab you, like things like that. She just is kind of freaked out by the whole idea of basements. And so she really doesn't like it. And Shiloh just keeps, Shiloh's there and Shiloh's trembling and looking at the door. Like the dog is very upset over something going on in the basement, right? And then she notices a little black dot climbing the frame. And it is a common house ant. The ants are important. I think, are they on the map? I thought I saw them on the map. No, I guess not. For some reason, I thought I saw them on the map. But now this is just one ant. So, of course, she doesn't think anything of it, but it is weird, I mean, now, when I thought about the whole idea of the ants, it wouldn't be uncommon for a house that old to have carpenter ants, right? They're going to eat away at the foundation. That's actually not unusual. I've actually lived somewhere where there were carpenter ants, and now they are bigger than the little black ants. Carpenter ants are typically much larger. So it's just, it's kind of weird, but she fixates on that. So I'm kind of like, okay, well, she's noticing that for a reason. She's saying how, she doesn't want them, like Jenny, the 7-year-old, wants to go in the basement. And Eve is like, I'm not opening that damn door. Going into the basement. You know what I mean? It's like she does not want them to go down into the basement. She's like, basement's a mess, which it is. The basement's a mess. There's nothing to see down there. It's like a dungeon, basically. And, why the hell do you want to go in the basement? But this 7-year-old kid is determined she's going to go in the basement. So what happens is the boys get into a fight. So it's kind of like a distraction, I guess you could say. And they're all focused on them and not Jenny. And then all of a sudden, Jenny is missing. So they realize she's not with them. And they're like, oh, well, she likes to play, the kid's a pain in the neck. Oh, she likes to play hide and seek. And, she's going to be somewhere in the house and we're going to go look for her and all that sort of thing. And they get upstairs And they realize that this 7-year-old kid has figured out how to get into the dumbwaiter in behind, I think it was wallpaper. It was wallpapered over, something like that. She ripped it out, opened the damn thing, and they're like, oh, it says, looks like she found a way into the basement after all. Like, seriously? I put down question. Why does a 7-year-old girl want to go in the basement so bad? That's the question I wrote, the comment that I wrote, because you got to admit, okay, that's friggin' weird that a 7-year-old girl wants to go into the basement. Why does she want to go into the basement, right? Very, very odd. Then, so actually that's where it ends. So it ends right at that point where Thomas says, looks like she found a way into the basement after all. Like, super creepy. So then the next thing moves into the documentation. Now this is a really short one, and it is Doc A12K9, and it says description transcript of a classified ad in the free section of the Yale Courier, date unknown, free chocolate lab. So this is about having their dog Buckley rehomed, and then it goes into, he's a loving dog, blah, blah, blah. Now, I don't know if that's the dog that they were talking about, but I think it's kind of unusual that that gets mentioned in here. And how come they wanted to get rid of the dog? And I think it's because dogs have certain instincts, right? I mean, it's just, look at how Shiloh is reacting to what's going on in there. Something's up, something's weird. So yeah, it's a dog thing. And then our last bit is the last on this page is our new word, which is the word man at the bottom for the Morse code. So we now have 3 words, and it is the old man. So that is the beginning of our sentence. And yeah, so that's going to be really interesting going in. It's fun to see what's coming up as we go through with the Morse code. So the next chapter we're going to read is chapter 3, which is hide and seek. Okay, so we're going to read that one. And then let's see if there's document. So there isn't documentation after each chapter, not on all of them. Let's see, is there documentation? Yeah, there's another really, really short one. So it is Doc B12 show. So that one will go along with chapter 3, hide and seek. So that's what we're reading next, okay? And that will be the next deep dive for We Used to Live Here. So next up is This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead, and we're reading, we read chapters 4 to 8. So what's happening in these 4 chapters, as just sort of a roundup, is Jane's kind of still working through how she feels about her father's death, as he passed away at the beginning in the first few chapters, and how she is kind of slowly beginning to entrench herself with this group of crime snoopers, right? So that's kind of where this is going. And by the end of it, she is more or less committing herself to getting involved in what's going on. So the first thing that happens in chapter 4 is, as per her request, her mom is going to arrange, like, she needs to see her dad. Like, she never got to see him, right? She never got to see him at the hospital. She wasn't at home. She was at university when he passed away. So she never got the chance to see him. Her request to her mom is, I know it costs money, but because he's going to be cremated, I need to see him laid out. So all in all, that is part of what is going to happen where her dad is concerned. And of course, she's going to deal with having to see him that way, which is also probably not good for her mental stability because she's having a hard time. I don't think it actually helps that she saw him. I mean, that's just the impression I get as I read through. Like I've marked off a few things in here. Not a lot happens in chapter 4. These are really, really, really short chapters. But she does start to investigate more information about the case that she saw on the TV of the bag that was pulled from the lake, and it had human remains in it, right? So that was kind of where we left off. So now we're on to chapter 5. So we're chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8 was what we read, right? So in chapter 5, right at the beginning, she can't sleep. She's having weird dreams. I mean, her dreams are kind of about her dad and about the bag in the lake, the body found in the lake. So anyway, she wakes up and she grabs her phone and she starts to investigate more about the body, finds out that they have identified the woman, and she was 46 from Indiantown, Florida. Now, Jane and her mom, they live in Florida. So that is an important factor for the story. And so she continues on about the whole case and the fact that they basically dubbed it the trash bag woman, which I think is a horrible thing to talk about. But the important part of this is that she gets onto, is it Reddit? No, it's a forum. Okay, so she gets into a forum, okay, and she starts to listen to, there are conversations going on about the case. So basically, these people are investigating the case. They're like true crime obsessed. And they get in there and they see if they can figure out things that the police couldn't. And I think she's a little taken aback about how much they know. Like they're talking about property records. They have access to the police report. And obviously it's somebody who can hack in and is able to look. Now, I think that police reports, basic police reports about an incident can be found online fairly easily. I know that you can usually see most of the information if you want to on a lot of cases. They don't put the investigation. This is just the police incident report on what actually occurred when they got to the lake and that kind of thing. So you can get that information fairly easily. And so she's just following the discussion in chapter 5 on the autopsy. They're talking about the autopsy, and because they don't know when she was last seen at work. I think it was work that reported her. And, the fact that they waited to report it. And meanwhile, this woman had never missed her job in 20 years she worked there. And it's very bizarre. That whole thing was very bizarre. So she's like easily addicted to this. And I think it's because partly she needs something else to focus on, because she's having a very hard time dealing with the death of her father, and this is taking her mind off it. So that's number one. And number two, I think that she also likes the mystery behind that. It's just like figuring something out. Now, Jane is sleeping in her parents' bed. Her mother's not sleeping there. Her mother's sleeping in the living room. But Jane is sleeping in there, which is kind of creepy, but I get it's her. Like she feels like she's closer to her dad. Her mom comes in the room and she's, talking about the funeral home. And Jane asks, how did he die? Do they know how he died? And he had a coronary artery occlusion leading to a myocardial infarction. It was a heart attack caused by plaque buildup in his arteries. Now, apparently, they knew he wasn't healthy. Like, he knew he wasn't healthy. And his doctor had wanted to put him on blood pressure medication. And he didn't want to take it. And Jane is having a hard time wondering why her father wouldn't take that. Like, why would you, in her mind, I guess, let yourself die? Like, why would you put yourself in that position if you knew that that could help you, right? And so I think that that is, that bothers her. But anyways, they talk about, for the rest of that, it, at the end of it, the fact that they've got the funeral home ready. And then chapter 7 is rough, because chapter 7, I said here, chapter deals with the feelings of having to view a loved one after they have passed. So I think that if you're really super sensitive, chapter 7 probably a little rough for you, because it's about Jane having to deal with seeing her dad. It's a very short chapter. Now, basically, she's got 90 minutes for viewing, and it says here in the end, I spent 20 of my 90 minutes. And I think she just couldn't accept the fact that he had passed away, and it was very hard for her. So, yeah, I mean, it's a short chapter, but it packs a hell of a punch, because she really does. Ashley Winstead is able to really make you feel for this kid who never really got to say goodbye to her dad. Yeah. Okay, so then we're on to chapter 8, which is the last chapter. Now, this is the one where it is 100%. She's online, she's in this forum, and she gets in there late at night looking for a distraction. So that is like the first line of chapter 8. It says, later that night, seeking distraction, I returned to the forum, this time on my laptop. There have been developments. So she's reading on about the case, okay? And what does it say here? It says, has anyone managed to speak to friends and neighbors? Jane says, I frowned at the screen. Would her friends and neighbors just open up to anyone who approached them? Were people that desperate to unburden themselves, or did they want to be a part of the action? So it's like, I wrote down a little comment that says she's learning the ropes, right? So she's learning and beginning to understand what you can do as an investigator. And a lot of times I think that maybe people like this can learn more than the police, because people don't want to tell the police, right? Like, I don't want to have anything to do with the police. So some random person who just comes up and starts chatting with you, you'll talk to them a hell of a lot more than you'll talk to the police. So I think that that's an important part. And then the other thing is the detail on the fact that she was working on Monday, she was missing on Tuesday, and they found her Friday. So there wasn't like a huge gap in there between when she went missing and when they found her. I think the only thing that they questioned was why it takes so long for them to report her, but it was their office that reported her, because the woman's single. She doesn't really go out. She doesn't do it. Like, she's not like, she's very introverted from the sounds of it. And the description that they gave of her, she is an introverted person. Then it says, now this is the important part, and I underlined this in red, okay? This is like the second last page of chapter 8. It says, it's a rinky-dink little, like, they're talking about a store, convenience store, okay? And it says, it's a rinky-dink, it doesn't have a website. Maybe Goku could dig through the online yellow pages. Don't suppose there's a chance anyone's nearby and could go in person. And then she says in her mind, Jane, why did I do it? Now, this is the beginning of her actually getting physically involved in what's going on. up to this point, she is just viewing what's in the forum. She has not joined the forum, right? So this is where she joins the forum. And the very last thing she says after she makes her username and everything is, I'll do it. Okay? Because I don't think she's far from Indian Town. Maybe a couple of hours, if that. I don't even know if she's even that far. But anyways, so that I underlined at the end. So that is those chapters. So now we're at the point in her telling, because she's telling us this story. She is our narrator. Our narrator is Jane, right? And she's giving us the goodies on how she ended up where she was in the very first chapter, which was like our prologue, right? So this is where we get down into the beginnings of her getting very deeply involved in this. And I think it's really great. So now what we have is we have 9, 10, 11, and 12. And those will be the next chapters that we're going to read. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I can't wait to get into that along with We Used to Live Here. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this. Now, if you want to get into maybe a deeper discussion on everything that's going on, and I have my Discord channel, and it is linked below, and the link is working, hopefully. I've had so much trouble with the link on the Discord channel, but it is there. Now, there's only a couple of us in there. It's a very small group at this point. I don't know that it's going to grow all that fast until we get a little bit more deeper into this. It might grow a bit faster, but there is, and I've broken down it so that there is a specific discussion folder for deep dives. Okay, so that's where, because there's like the general, so it's just like general talk and fun, but I wanted to keep this stuff separate, and the videos are going to go in there as well, and they'll be in order. So I think that that's super helpful as well. So that's what we're going to do with that. And yeah, I think that's it. Now, I would love comments. I would also love any constructive criticism on things that I could do a little bit differently with these sorts of videos. That was one of the reasons I kind of tried to change the background, make it look a little different, because I thought that, you know, like I said, sitting at the desk can be boring, and I figured I'd try this. It's something different, right? Yeah, so that's it for now, and I guess we will see you in the next deep dive video.